Your dog has been alone for 8 hours. You know this because you watched the clock. You left at 8 in the morning, you came back at 4 in the afternoon, and you felt guilty the entire drive home. But your dog doesn't know it was 8 hours. Your dog doesn't know what 8 hours means. And yet, the moment you walk through that door, the reaction is the same, whether you were gone for 8 hours or 8 minutes. The jumping, the spinning, the complete collapse of composure. Every single time, as if you had been gone for years. Which raises a question that sounds simple, but isn't. Does your dog experience time at all? And if animals don't experience time the way you do, if the 8 hours you spent worrying about your dog felt like nothing to your dog, then what exactly is time? Is it a feature of the universe? Or is it something your brain constructs? And if your brain constructs it, what happens when the brain doing the constructing is built completely differently from yours? Let's start with what we know. Every living organism on Earth, from a single-celled bacterium to a blue whale, has some relationship with time. This relationship is written into biology itself, not into consciousness, not into thought, but into the chemical cycles that keep cells alive. These are called circadian rhythms, internal biological clocks that run on roughly 24-hour cycles, regulating sleep, hormone release, body temperature, digestion, and dozens of other functions. They exist in plants. They exist in fungi. They exist in creatures with no nervous system whatsoever. In 2017, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to 3 scientists, Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young, for their work uncovering the molecular mechanism behind these clocks. Inside nearly every cell of nearly every living organism is a feedback loop of proteins that takes approximately 24 hours to complete one cycle. It doesn't need sunlight to run. It doesn't need external cues. It just runs. Time, at the most basic biological level, is not something organisms experience. It is something they are made of. But that is not what we mean when we ask whether animals feel time. What we mean is something harder, something that requires more than a protein feedback loop. We mean subjective duration, the felt sense that a moment is long or short, the experience of waiting. The awareness that something happened in the past and something else will happen in the future. The sense that you exist inside a stream of moments moving in one direction. That is a different question entirely. In the 1970s, psychologist John Gibbon developed what became known as scalar timing theory. He was trying to understand how animals estimate duration. How a rat in a laboratory learns that pressing a lever after 30 seconds produces food, while pressing it after 10 seconds produces nothing. Rats learn this. Pigeons learn this. Mice, fish, and monkeys learn this. The ability to estimate duration is ancient and widespread across the animal kingdom. But Gibbon noticed something strange about how animals make these estimates. Their errors scale with the duration being measured. If you train a rat to press a lever after 10 seconds, its errors cluster within a second or two of the target. If you train it to press after 100 seconds, its errors are 10 times larger. The ratio stays constant even as the absolute duration changes. This is called the scalar property of timing, and it appears in virtually every animal tested, including humans. What this means is that animal time perception is not a ruler. It is a ratio. A 10-second interval and a 100-second interval are not experienced as 10 and 100. They are experienced as ratios relative to something.
And that something shifts depending on the animal, the context, and something neuroscientists are still working to identify precisely. Time, for animals, is not objective. It is proportional. It is relational. It bends.
And it bends most dramatically at the level of brain speed. In 2013, researchers at Trinity College Dublin published a study in the journal Animal Behavior that measured the ability of different animals to detect flickering light. This is called the critical flicker fusion frequency, the point at which a flickering light appears to become a steady beam, because the eye and brain can no longer distinguish individual flashes. The higher an animal's critical flicker fusion frequency, the faster its nervous system processes visual information. And the faster its nervous system processes information, the more slowly, from its perspective, the world appears to move. The findings were striking. Humans have a flicker fusion frequency of roughly 60 Hz. We perceive the world at a certain speed. Dogs are at roughly 75 Hz. The world moves slightly more slowly for them than for us. This is why older televisions, which refreshed at 50 to 60 Hz, appeared to flicker to dogs, even when they looked perfectly smooth to their owners. Flies have a flicker fusion frequency of around 250 Hz.
What this means is that a fly perceives time at roughly 4 times the resolution you do. When you swing your hand to swat a fly, from the fly's perspective, your hand is moving in something close to slow motion. This is not a metaphor. The fly's nervous system is processing the incoming visual data 4 times faster than yours. It has 4 times as many moments to respond. For the fly, you are slow. For you, it is gone before you can react. The same physical universe. 2 completely different experiences of how fast it is moving. But speed of perception is only one dimension of time experience. There is another dimension that goes deeper, and it is the one that separates humans from almost every other animal on the planet. Mental time travel. In 1997, psychologist Endel Tolving introduced this term to describe the human ability to mentally project ourselves backward into the past and forward into the future. Not just to remember that something happened, but to re-experience it from the inside. To feel yourself back inside a past moment, or to simulate yourself inside a future one that hasn't happened yet. This capacity, Tolving argued, is what makes human time experience fundamentally different from animal time experience. And for years, the scientific consensus was that mental time travel was uniquely human, that animals lived in an eternal present, that they could learn from the past and respond to future signals, but they could not consciously visit either. Then, Nicola Clayton at Cambridge University ran a series of experiments on western scrub jays, a species of bird with an extraordinary memory for food caching that challenged everything. Scrub jays hide thousands of food items every season. They remember not just where they hid them, but what they hid and when. They know that certain foods degrade faster than others, and they account for elapsed time when deciding which caches to visit first. When Clayton allowed the birds to observe another bird watching them hide food, the birds would later return in private and move the food to a new location, but only if the watching bird had been a stranger. If it was a bird they trusted, they didn't bother. This is not simple stimulus response behavior. This requires something that looks remarkably like remembering a specific past event, anticipating a future situation, and adjusting behavior based on the inferred mental states of another individual. Whether this constitutes genuine episodic memory in the way humans experience it remains debated, but the debate itself is significant. The line between human time experience and animal time experience turned out to be far less clear than anyone had assumed.
So where does this leave the question of your dog? Here is what the evidence currently suggests. Your dog has circadian rhythms as precise as yours. It has interval timing, the ability to estimate durations, which is why it starts waiting by the door roughly when you usually come home. It has associative memory that links past events to present situations. It experiences something, anxiety, anticipation, relief, that is real and biological and runs on the same neurochemical systems as your own emotions. But your dog almost certainly does not sit by the window for 8 hours consciously experiencing the passage of time the way you would if you were waiting. It does not check an internal clock and think 4 more hours. It does not imagine you coming home. It does not construct a narrative in which it is a character waiting inside a story that will resolve when the door opens. It lives closer to the present moment than you do.
Not because it is less intelligent, but because the architecture of its consciousness is built differently. The prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with mental time travel, future planning, and narrative self-construction, is proportionally far smaller in dogs than in humans. The machinery for projecting consciousness through time is simply less developed.
Your dog experiences time, but it probably does not experience time passing. And here is the part that turns the question back on you. Because what the research on animal time perception reveals is not just how differently other creatures experience the world, it reveals how constructed your own time experience is.
The feeling that time flows, the sense of a continuous present moving through past and future, the experience of duration as something you are inside of. None of this is a direct readout of physical reality. It is a model your brain builds, a simulation that feels so seamless and so total that it is almost impossible to recognize it as a simulation at all.
When you are absorbed in something, time compresses. An hour becomes nothing. When you are bored or afraid, time stretches. A minute becomes enormous. When you are very old, decades collapse into what feels like a handful of vivid moments. When you are young, a single summer feels infinite. The clock on the wall does not change. Your brain's construction of time does.
You are not so different from the fly or the dog or the scrub jay. You are all running different versions of the same fundamental process, a nervous system trying to navigate a universe that moves, using time as the dimension it moves through. The difference is not that you experience time and they do not. The difference is that you know you do. And that knowledge, the awareness of your own position inside the stream, is the thing that makes your experience of time feel different from every other creature on this planet. Whether that makes it more real or simply more complicated is a question no clock can answer.